Greetings everyone, I'm Detective STARBORN, and I'm glad to see you on my YouTube channel. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on new and interesting videos. Thank you, and enjoy watching. A 17-year-old girl was going to go to school, but she never showed up for classes. Soon the police took up this case, and they managed to discover a number of rather unexpected facts and clues quite quickly. In the end, all this led them to solve this mystery, and the case was solved, but its finale outraged the whole country. Ellie Gould was born on February 6, 2002, in the small British town of Calne. She had a large and close-knit family. In addition to her parents and older brother, a large number of relatives lived nearby, and they were all very close. From early childhood, Ellie loved animals, especially horses. Her parents regularly took her to the farm and at one point decided to buy the girl a pony. She began to ride, performed at various competitions, and achieved good results in this area. In the future, Ellie wanted to go to university at the Faculty of Psychology, after which she would get a job in the mounted police. At the beginning of 2019, when she was 17, Ellie was finishing her last year of school. There she had many friends, since the girl always tried to get along with everyone and avoid any conflicts. In addition, at the beginning of the year, Ellie's classmate asked her out on a date, and they began dating. On May 3rd, Ellie, as usual, woke up early in the morning and began to prepare for school. That day, she did not have the first lessons, so she needed to get to school by about noon, just for a few classes. She agreed with her friend that she would pick her up, said goodbye to her parents, who had gone to work, and began to wait. A few hours later, she wrote to her friend that she decided to skip school that day and stay at home, so she said not to pick her up. Her friend thought that Ellie just didn't want to come for only a few lessons and left without her. Around 3 p.m., Ellie's father returned from work. He went to the kitchen, where a heartbreaking sight opened up before him. His daughter was lying on the floor face down, and there was a large blood stain around her. The man was in a state of shock and first thought that Ellie might have fallen and hit her head, but then the father noticed that there were traces of blood all over the kitchen. In addition, he noticed that there was a knife in his daughter's neck, and the girl's hands were clasped on its handle. The man called an ambulance and tried to provide Ellie with first aid, following the operator's instructions. However, the girl showed no signs of life, and the father realized that she was already dead. The doctors who arrived at the scene could only state her death and also established that the girl had been dead for at least 4 hours. In addition, the doctors found many stab wounds on her body, mainly in the neck area. Ellie's parents could not believe what was happening. When the police told them that their daughter had been killed, the girl's father still refused to accept this information for some time. He was still in a state of shock and continued to think that some kind of accident had happened to Ellie. After the body was handed over to medical experts, they established even more information about what had happened. In addition to 13 stab wounds, traces of strangulation were found on her neck. However, the experts concluded that the criminal had not managed to complete the intended in this way, after which he took up the knife. They also found many defensive wounds, which indicated that Ellie had tried to fight off the attacker. While forensic experts were examining the crime scene, the police began an investigation. They brought the victim's parents to the station and asked if anyone could wish their daughter harm. After thinking about it, only one name came to mind for both of them: Thomas, Ellie's boyfriend. Her mother told investigators that the couple had only started dating a few months ago, and at first, Ellie was very happy about it. Before that, she had never had a relationship, and Thomas seemed like a great guy to her. He was an excellent student, was involved in sports, and was on the school rugby team. Despite this, their relationship began to deteriorate quite quickly. Thomas wanted to spend almost all his time with her, and every day he became more and more insistent on this issue. Ellie, on the contrary, could not give him so much time, since she needed to prepare for the final exams, take care of her ponies, and train with them. As a result, Thomas's behavior noticeably worsened. He was offended by her and reproached her for not wanting to spend time with him, and also constantly tried to control her. He called and wrote to her all day, after which he was offended that she could not always answer him instantly. The girl's parents initially believed that Thomas was not a good match for her. Sometimes he came to visit them, and most of the time he was just silent, which seemed strange. Ellie, on the other hand, was a very sociable person, so her parents thought that their relationship would not last long. And so it happened. Just a few months after they started dating, Ellie began to think about wanting to break up with him. In addition to the fact that Thomas's behavior caused her more and more discomfort, she decided that at this stage she needed to focus all her energy on preparing for exams and entering university. In the end, she made the decision to break up with him and told Thomas about it on May 2nd, just a day before her death. The police also spoke with Ellie's friends, who shared additional details about the breakup. The girl told them that Thomas took this decision very negatively. He tried to convince her to continue the relationship, constantly called and asked for a meeting, but Ellie refused to discuss it. Their mutual friends also said that after the breakup, Thomas changed a lot. On that very day, he posted on his social media that the last days had become very difficult for him. In addition to breaking up with Ellie, his father had recently been diagnosed with cancer, and his aunt had passed away. At the end, Thomas added that it was hard for him to cope with all this, and he planned to turn to the school psychologist. After this publication, Thomas's friends contacted him and said that they were ready to support him. After talking with him, they noticed that the young man was indeed in a depressive state. But when the police asked them if he could have harmed Ellie, the friends refused to believe it and denied such a possibility. Having received all this information, the investigators decided to talk to him. But before that, they examined the victim's smartphone and found that Thomas had written to her that morning and suggested meeting. They came to the young man's house and asked where he had been in the first half of the day. Thomas said that his mother had taken him to school that morning, but he was too upset by the breakup and all the other problems, so he decided to skip the lesson. Instead, the guy waited for his mother to leave, walked to the bus stop, and went back home. On the way, he also sent a message to the teacher that he would not be in class. After that, according to Thomas, he did not leave the house. The guy did his homework and rested for the rest of the day. During this conversation, he also asked if everything was all right with Ellie, and the police informed him of her death. After finishing talking with him, the investigators went to his mother, where they were in for a rather interesting twist. The woman said that she did indeed give her son a ride to school. But then she came home, and Thomas was not there. Then the police went to talk to the young man again. He said that he did not want his mother to know about skipping a whole school day, so he hid in his closet and waited for her to go to work. With all this, the police noticed that the young man had fresh scratches on his face. When asked about their origin, Thomas claimed that he scratched himself, but the investigators took it with disbelief. Considering that, according to the conclusion of medical experts, Ellie tried to fight off the criminal, his wounds could well have been received during the attack. Officers also questioned all of Ellie's neighbors, and one of them shared an interesting observation. That morning, he saw some man approach the girl's house, but due to the distance, he could not make out his face or other signs. The neighbor described to them the clothes that this person was wearing. The police decided to check Thomas's alibi and requested data on the location of his smartphone. They found out that the young man had indeed returned home from school, but further, the investigators were waiting for strong discrepancies with his story. At 10:50, Thomas's phone disconnected from his home Wi-Fi, after which he headed towards Ellie's house. 3 minutes later, the young man's smartphone was near her house, after which it was there for an hour. At 11:51, the phone began to move back towards Thomas's house, and a few minutes later, connected to his Wi-Fi. The police understood that the young man would not be able to cover such a distance on foot in just 3 minutes, since he lived in a neighboring village a few miles from Ellie's house. Then they found footage from surveillance cameras along this route and saw a silver Ford Focus on them, which belonged to his parents. The movements of the car coincided with the movement of Thomas's phone, so the investigators came to the conclusion that it was he who should have been behind the wheel. In addition, the cameras captured how the same car drove out of Thomas's house again and returned there after 18 minutes. Investigators were unable to find a single camera that would allow them to understand where exactly he went. They only managed to determine the approximate area where Thomas could have been, and the officers went there to search. Based on the fact that the young man apparently stopped there for only a minute, the police assumed that he could have gotten rid of some evidence. Soon this guess paid off. Combing a small wooded area, officers found a garbage bag there containing bloody rags and an apron. All this was enough to go to Thomas's house with a search. The police asked where his clothes were that he was wearing in the morning. The young man said that he threw it in the washing machine, and the officers seized these things for analysis. They also handed over his shoes to the experts, and they were able to find traces of blood on almost all the clothes. Despite the fact that Thomas tried to wash them off, the experts managed to extract a DNA sample from the remnant of blood. Analysis showed that it belonged to Ellie, as did the blood from the rags found in the forest. It is also worth noting that Thomas's clothes matched the description of Ellie's neighbor, who saw some man near her house. All this, together with other evidence, resulted in a fairly detailed picture of what happened that morning. According to the investigators, Thomas initially planned to commit this murder. After his mother took him to school, he immediately returned home by bus, hid in the closet, and waited for her to leave. Then he got behind the wheel of their family car and drove to Ellie's house. Apparently, the girl let him in. Perhaps Thomas said that he just wanted to talk, and they ended up in the kitchen. Further, based on the report of medical experts, the guy tried to strangle the victim, during which he received many scratches. However, he failed to kill her in this way, so he grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her 13 times. For the next hour, Thomas tried to wash the crime scene, as evidenced by the bloody rags and streaks in the kitchen. Then, he put these rags in a garbage bag and tried to wash his sneakers in the sink, where traces of blood were also found. After that, he wiped the knife with a kitchen apron, trying to erase his fingerprints, and threw this apron into the bag. Then he placed the knife in Ellie's hand and brought it to her neck. Apparently, he hoped that because of this, the police would think that the girl had done it all herself and would not look for him. Another unusual discovery was that message about a friend, in which Ellie said that she would skip school and asked not to pick her up. Investigators concluded that it was sent after the girl's death. Apparently, Thomas took her iPhone and unlocked it with Ellie's finger, after which he wrote this message himself. But Thomas's adventures did not end there. After he threw his clothes in the wash and threw out the bag with the evidence in the forest, he ran into his neighbor and asked him to take him to school. There he attended the remaining lessons, talked with friends, and went to the school nurse. He told her that the last days had been very difficult for him, and it was hard for him to cope with all this. As a result, the nurse decided to call his mother, and she took Thomas home. It was only after this that he posted on his social media that post in which he talked about the breakup with Ellie and other problems. At that time, the girl's body had not yet been discovered, and the police believed that with all these actions, the guy was just trying to create an alibi for himself. It took the police only a few hours to gather all this information, and already on the evening of the same day, the 17-year-old young man was arrested on suspicion of murder. Thomas continued to deny his involvement in the murder, and the case was brought to court. The first hearing took place on August 29th, 4 months after the murder, and this time, Thomas suddenly decided to change his testimony. He appeared before the judge and confessed that he had killed Ellie, but there was a nuance here. According to his new story, that morning he came to Ellie to prepare for the exam. During their studies, an argument arose between them, and after that the young man remembered almost nothing. He said that he had vague memories of trying to strangle her, but all further actions were completely erased from his memory. The prosecution did not agree with this version, pointing out obvious inconsistencies. Firstly, Ellie did not want to continue any relationship with him, which all her friends and parents knew about. For this reason, the version of joint preparation for exams seemed rather doubtful, especially given the fact that a friend was supposed to pick up Ellie soon. Secondly, the memory lapse did not fit with the fact that the young man spent a whole hour trying to wash the crime scene. Moreover, he put the murder weapon in Ellie's hands, trying to make it look as if she had done it herself. And then he spent some more time getting rid of evidence and creating an alibi for himself at school, and also tried to wash all his clothes. Taking all this into account, the court sided with the prosecution, and in November 2019, Thomas was found guilty of murder. Before sentencing, he made a final statement where he apologized to Ellie's relatives and said that he sincerely regretted his action. However, at the end of the trial, another problem arose. At the time of the murder, he was 17, which had a direct impact on the sentence. The judge sentenced him to life in prison with the right to parole in just 12 years. He also added another 5 years to this term in connection with the brutality of the crime. Thus, Thomas will have the opportunity to be released at the age of 34. This sentence caused outrage not only among the victim's family, but also among many residents of the country. People wondered how a person who committed premeditated murder could get off with such a short term, but no one was able to influence the court's decision. Ellie's father stated that this sentence puts other women who may become victims after his release at risk. The man believes that Thomas is a psychopath who poses a danger to society if he is released, and the young man should not be released from prison for the rest of his days. Such injustice prompted Ellie's parents to devote the next few years to making changes to the current legislation. In 2021, they managed to make progress, and the authorities signed Ellie's law, according to which juvenile killers could now receive prison terms of up to 27 years. Unfortunately, all this will no longer apply to Thomas, who was convicted under the old laws. The only thing that the victim's parents managed to achieve was to oblige Thomas to undergo a long course of therapy after his release, in the hope that this would help prevent him from committing such crimes in the future. Since then, Ellie's parents have regularly held events in memory of their daughter, inviting children to ride her horses. According to the mother, this activity helps her a little to smooth out the pain of loss, since horseback riding was Ellie's main hobby. Share your opinion about this story in the comments, and do not forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching this video, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I look forward to your comments on this situation. That was Detective STARBORN. See you soon.